Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. The glass towers of Manhattan gleamed under the midnight moon as Ethan sat alone in his corner office on the 42nd floor, another solitary evening weighing heavy on his broad shoulders. At 34, he commanded a business empire worth billions, owned penthouses around the world, and earned respect in boardrooms across continents. Yet, as he stared out at the sleeping city below, his heart felt as empty as the silent hallways surrounding him. Success had come at a price he was only beginning to understand. While other men his age were tucking their children into bed and kissing their wives goodnight, Ethan worked through the lonely hours, filling the void in his life with contracts and acquisitions that meant nothing when there was no one to share them with. A soft sound from the outer office caught his attention. Ethan frowned, checking his platinum Rolex. 11:47 M. The cleaning crew wasn't scheduled until after midnight, and security would have notified him of any visitors. Curiosity piqued. He rose from his leather chair and walked toward the sound, his Italian leather shoes silent on the polished marble floor. What he discovered made his heart stop completely. A small figure knelt beside the reception desk, tiny hands gripping a cloth far too large for her delicate fingers. She appeared to be 9 years old, with beautiful dark curls escaping from a small ponytail and wearing clothes that had clearly seen better days. But it was the tears streaming down her cherubic face that pierced straight through his chest. You see, the child worked with desperate determination, scrubbing the marble base with movements that spoke of exhaustion beyond her years. Her small shoulders shook with quiet sobs as she cleaned, completely unaware of Ethan's presence. In all his years of business, Ethan had never seen anything that affected him as profoundly as this child's silent struggle. "Sweetheart," Ethan called softly, his voice barely above a whisper. The child looked up with startled brown eyes, the most beautiful, soulful eyes Ethan had ever seen. They were filled with a mixture of fear, sadness, and a maturity that no child should possess. For a moment, they simply stared at each other across the dimly lit office, and Ethan felt something shift in his universe. "I'm sorry, sir," the little girl whispered, scrambling to her feet and clutching the cleaning cloth to her chest. "I didn't mean to disturb you. I'll be quiet, I promise." The fear in her voice made Ethan's chest tighten with unexpected emotion. He knelt down to her level, his expensive suit forgotten as his knees touched the cold floor. "You're not disturbing me, sweetheart. What's your name?" "Sophie," she answered, in a voice so small it was barely audible. "Sophie Carter." "That's a beautiful name," Ethan said gently, noticing how she trembled slightly. He had negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, but speaking to this frightened child required all his concentration. "Sophie, can you tell me why you're here so late? Where are your parents?" At the mention of her parents, fresh tears welled up in Sophie's eyes, and Ethan felt his heart break all over again. The child's lower lip quivered as she struggled to find her words, and Ethan had to resist the overwhelming urge to pull her into his arms. "My mama is very sick," Sophie finally whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "She's in the hospital, and the doctors say her heart is failing." Ethan felt as though someone had struck him. This beautiful, innocent child was carrying a burden that would crush most adults. "Oh, sweetheart," he breathed, his voice thick with sympathy. "The doctors say Mama needs a special surgery, or her heart will stop forever." Sophie continued, the words tumbling out as if a dam had burst. "But it costs so much money, more money than we've ever seen, so I have to work. I have to save my mama." The raw desperation in the child's voice made Ethan's eyes burn with unshed tears. In his world of corporate mergers and hostile takeovers, he had forgotten that real people faced real struggles that couldn't be solved with a phone call or a signed check. "Sophie, how long have you been cleaning here?" "Every night for 3 weeks," she said, wiping her nose with the back of her small hand. "The cleaning lady, Mrs. Lopez, she feels sorry for me. She lets me help her and gives me some of her pay, but it's not enough. It's never enough." Ethan's throat constricted as he watched this brave little girl try to save her mother's life with her tiny hands and enormous heart. He had spent his adult life accumulating wealth and power, but he had never felt as humbled as he did in this moment. Kneeling before a 9-year-old who understood sacrifice better than most adults. "Can you show me a picture of your mama?" Ethan asked softly. Sophie's face lit up for the first time, and Ethan saw a glimpse of the happy child she should be. She reached into her small pocket and pulled out a crumpled photograph, handling it with the reverence of a precious jewel. Her careful movements told Ethan that this picture was her most treasured possession. The image took Ethan's breath away. Even lying in a hospital bed, clearly weak and ill, the woman in the photo was breathtakingly beautiful. She had the same dark curls as Sophie, the same soulful brown eyes. But there was something else in her fascia, strength and grace, that shone through even in sickness. Ethan found himself staring at the photograph longer than necessary, struck by an inexplicable feeling that this woman was somehow important. "She's beautiful," Ethan said softly, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. "What's your mama's name?" "Amelia Carter," Sophie said with unmistakable pride. "She used to be a teacher before she got sick. She taught little kids how to read and write. She's the best mama in the whole world, and she always tells me that love is the most important thing, even when we don't have money for food." Ethan studied the photograph again, unable to shake the feeling that he was looking at someone extraordinary. The woman's face seemed to call to something deep in his soul, awakening protective instincts he didn't know he possessed. "Sophie," Ethan said gently, handing back the precious photograph, "which hospital is your mama in?" "St. Mary's Medical Center," Sophie replied, carefully tucking the photo back into her pocket like a sacred relic. "Room 314. But I can only visit her for a little bit each day, because I have to work to pay for her medicine." The matter-of-fact way this 9-year-old spoke about working to pay for life-saving medical treatment made Ethan's chest tighten with a mixture of admiration and heartbreak. This child possessed more courage and determination than most adults he knew in the business world. "Sweetheart, you shouldn't have to carry this burden alone," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. "No child should have to work to save their parent's life." "But I have to," Sophie insisted, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "If I don't work, Mama will die, and she's all I have in the whole world. I can't lose her, Mr. Bennett." "Ethan," he replied. "Ethan Bennett, and Sophie, I want you to listen to me very carefully. You're not going to lose your mama." The hope that flickered in Sophie's eyes was almost too much for Ethan to bear. "You really think so?" "I promise you," Ethan said, and he had never meant anything more in his life. Something about this child and her dying mother had awakened something profound in his heart, a purpose he had never felt before, a love he couldn't yet understand. As Ethan looked into Sophie's trusting eyes, he felt destiny calling to him across the sterile office space. This brave little girl cleaning his floors at midnight would change his life forever, leading him to a love he never knew he was searching for. "Come on, princess," Ethan said, using the endearment that felt completely natural. "Let's go save your mama." Chapter 2. Love's Destiny Awakens. The city streets blurred past Ethan's Bentley as he drove through Manhattan with an urgency that surprised even him. Beside him, little Sophie sat, clutching her precious photograph, her small frame dwarfed by the luxury leather seats. The image of her mother's face haunted Ethan's thoughts. There had been something in that woman's eyes, even unconscious in a hospital bed, that called to his very soul. "Mr. Ethan," Sophie whispered, breaking the tense silence. "What if we're too late? What if Mama's heart stops before we get there?" Ethan reached over and gently squeezed her small hand. "We're going to make it, princess. Your mama is going to be fine." The conviction in his voice surprised him. He barely knew this child, yet he felt responsible for her happiness in a way he'd never experienced before. St. Mary's Medical Center loomed before them in the pre-dawn darkness, its windows glowing like beacons of hope and despair. During his urgent drive, Ethan had made 3 crucial phone calls, one to his personal physician, Dr. Thompson, one to the city's most renowned cardiac surgeon, Dr. Patel, and one to the hospital's chief administrator. By the time they walked through the automatic doors, a team of specialists was already being assembled. "Mr. Bennett." The night administrator greeted him nervously, clearly flustered by the sudden attention from one of the city's most powerful men. "Dr. Patel is waiting for you in the cardiac wing. He's reviewed the patient's charts and says the situation is extremely critical." Ethan's jaw tightened as he followed the administrator through sterile hallways. Sophie's small hand gripping his with desperate trust. When they finally stopped outside room 314, Ethan felt his breath catch in his throat. "Sir, I should warn you," the administrator said quietly. "The patient is in critical condition. Her heart is failing rapidly, and without immediate surgical intervention within the next few hours," Ethan didn't let him finish. He pushed open the door and stepped inside, and his world shifted completely off its axis. Even unconscious and connected to a maze of tubes and monitors, Amelia was the most beautiful woman Ethan had ever seen. Her dark hair spread across the white pillow like silk, and her face, though pale and drawn from illness, possessed an ethereal beauty that made his chest tighten with inexplicable emotion. But it was more than her physical beauty. Something about her very presence filled the sterile room with warmth and grace, as if her soul was calling to his across an impossible distance. Ethan approached her bedside slowly, drawn by a force he couldn't resist or understand. The steady beeping of the heart monitor emphasized how fragile her hold on life truly was, and the sound made his own heart race with fear for this woman he'd never met, but somehow felt he'd been searching for his entire life. "Mama," Sophie whispered, rushing to her mother's side and carefully taking her hand. "I brought help. This is Mr. Ethan, and he's going to save you." Watching this brave child speak to her unconscious mother with such faith and love, Ethan felt something fundamental shift inside him. He had spent years building an empire, accumulating wealth and power, but he had never felt as purposeful as he did, standing in this hospital room. Dr. Patel entered moments later, a distinguished man in his 50s with kind eyes and steady hands. "Mr. Bennett, thank you for calling me in. I've reviewed Miss Carter's case, and I'm afraid the situation is more serious than initially thought." "Tell me everything," Ethan said, his voice commanding despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "She has severe dilated cardiomyopathy with multiple valve failures," Dr. Patel explained carefully. "Her heart muscle is damaged and can't pump blood effectively. She needs immediate surgery. We'll have to repair or replace the damaged valves and possibly install a ventricular assist device to help her heart function. Then we do the surgery," Ethan said without hesitation. "Tonight. Whatever it costs, whatever you need, make it happen." Dr. Patel hesitated. "Mr. Bennett, this type of surgery is extremely complex and expensive. We're talking about $300,000 to $400,000 for the surgery alone, not including post-operative care, medications, and the assist device. The total cost could easily exceed $500,000. Ethan looked back at Amelia's peaceful face, then at Sophie, who was holding her mother's hand and whispering words of love and encouragement. The sight of this child's unwavering devotion, combined with his inexplicable connection to her mother, awakened something primal and protective in Ethan's heart. "I don't care if it costs $10 million, Ethan said firmly. "Use the best equipment, the finest techniques, spare no expense. She's going to live." As the medical team mobilized for emergency surgery, Ethan found himself unable to leave Amelia's bedside. He studied her face, memorizing every detail, the elegant curve of her eyebrows, the gentle slope of her nose, the way her lips curved slightly even in unconsciousness. There was something about her that felt familiar, though he was certain they'd never met. "Mr. Ethan," Sophie said softly, tugging on his jacket. "Will you stay with me while they fix Mama's heart?" "Of course, Princess," Ethan replied, lifting her onto his lap as they settled into the uncomfortable waiting room chairs. "I'm not going anywhere." Hours passed like years. Ethan held Sophie as she slept fitfully in his arms. And for the first time in his adult life, he understood what it meant to love someone more than your own existence. This brave little girl and her beautiful, dying mother had somehow become his entire world in the span of a single night, filling a void in his heart that he hadn't even known existed. When Dr. Patel finally emerged from surgery at dawn, his tired smile told Ethan everything he needed to know before he spoke a word. "The surgery was successful, Doctor," Patel announced, pulling off his surgical cap. "We were able to repair 2 of the damaged valves and replace a third. The ventricular assist device is functioning perfectly, and her heart is responding well. She's going to live, Mr. Bennett." Sophie burst into tears of pure joy, and Ethan found his own eyes burning as he held this precious child who had just gotten her mother back. "When can we see her? She's being moved to the cardiac ICU now. She should wake up within the next few hours." When Ethan and Sophie were finally allowed into the ICU, Ethan felt as though lightning had struck him. Amelia's brown eyes were open, and they were even more beautiful than he'd imagined, filled with intelligence, warmth, and a strength that had carried her through this ordeal. But when her gaze met his, something electric and profound passed between thema recognition that went deeper than memory, a connection that felt like destiny itself. "Mama," Sophie cried softly, careful not to disturb the medical equipment as she gently hugged her mother. "My sweet baby," Amelia whispered, her voice hoarse but filled with love as she stroked Sophie's hair with a trembling hand. "I'm here. Mama's here. This is Mr. Ethan Bennett," Sophie said excitedly, her face glowing with gratitude and joy. "He saved your life, Mama. He brought the best doctors and paid for everything." Amelia's eyes widened as she looked at Ethan again, and he caught something in her expression: surprise, gratitude, and perhaps a flicker of something deeper. "Thank you," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I don't understand why a stranger would show such incredible kindness to people you don't even know. Because the moment I saw you and Sophie, you stopped being strangers," Ethan said softly, moving closer to her bedside. He felt drawn to her like a moth to flame, unable to resist the pull of her presence. "I couldn't let anything happen to either of you." The words surprised even Ethan with their intensity and truth. Looking into Amelia's eyes now, feeling the inexplicable pull of her soul calling to his, Ethan realized that saving her life hadn't been charity or even kindness, it had been destiny calling him home to a love he'd been searching for without knowing it. As Ethan gazed into the eyes of the woman he was already falling desperately in love with, he knew that his life had just begun in this sterile hospital room with a 9-year-old angel and her beautiful mother who would teach him the true meaning of family, sacrifice, and unconditional love. Chapter 3. Passionate Hearts Collide. 3 weeks had passed since Amelia's life-saving surgery, and Ethan found himself at St. Mary's Medical Center every single day, drawn by a force he couldn't resist or fully understand. Each morning, he would arrive with fresh flowers-white roses that seemed to make Amelia's face light up, though he couldn't explain why he knew they were her favorites. Something deep in his heart simply knew. "Mr. Bennett," Amelia said softly as he entered her room, carrying another pristine bouquet. "You really don't need to keep doing this. You've already saved my life. You owe us nothing more." Ethan set the flowers in the vase beside her bed, his fingers lingering as he arranged them with surprising tenderness. The simple domestic gesture felt natural, as if he'd been caring for this woman his entire life. "I don't do this because I owe you anything, Amelia. I do it because being here with you and Sophie feels like the most important part of my day." The way he said her name, with such gentle reverence, made Amelia's breath catch in her throat. Over the past 3 weeks, she had watched this powerful, wealthy man transform in her presence. The cold businessman who commanded corporate empires became warm and gentle when he sat beside her bed, reading to her or simply talking about their dreams and fears. "Tell me about Sophie's father," Ethan said quietly, settling into the chair he'd claimed as his own beside her bed. It was a question he'd been wanting to ask for days, driven by his growing attachment to the child and his need to understand Amelia's past. Amelia's face clouded with pain and shame. "There's not much to tell," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It was a mistake. A terrible, stupid mistake. I was 22, working 2 jobs to pay for nursing school, and I met a man at a conference where I was serving cocktails. He was charming, sophisticated, everything I thought I wanted." Ethan felt a stab of jealousy at the thought of another man touching Amelia, which surprised him with its intensity. "What happened?" "He told me he was divorced, that he was lonely, and had never felt such a connection with anyone." Amelia continued, tears forming in her eyes. "We spent 1 night together, and it was beautifuler, so I thought. When I discovered I was pregnant and tried to contact him, I learned the truth. He was married with 3 children, and when I told him about the baby, he offered me money to take care of the problem and never contact him again." The pain in Amelia's voice made Ethan's chest tighten with protective rage. He abandoned you when you needed him most. He made it clear that if I tried to contact him again, he'd destroy my career and make sure I could never work in healthcare, Amelia said, wiping away a tear. So I raised Sophie alone. She's never known her biological father, and honestly, I'm grateful for that. A man who would abandon his child doesn't deserve to know her. Ethan reached out and gently took Amelia's hand, feeling the familiar electric shock that occurred every time they touched. His loss is immeasurable. Sophie is the most incredible child I've ever met. She adores you, Amelia said softly, studying Ethan's face with wonder. I've never seen her bond with anyone the way she has with you. It's like she's been waiting her whole life for you to walk into it. The observation struck Ethan deeply because he felt exactly the same way. From the moment he'd found Sophie cleaning his office, he'd felt an inexplicable paternal connection to her not biological, but something deeper, a choice of the heart that transcended genetics. Mama, Mr. Ethan. Sophie's voice rang out as she bounced into the room, her face glowing with excitement as she held up a perfect report card. Look, all A's and misses. Wilson said I'm the best reader in the whole 4th grade. Ethan's face lit up with genuine pride as Sophie launched herself into his arms. Over the past 3 weeks, these moments with her had become the highlight of his existence. I'm so proud of you, Princess. You're brilliant, just like your mama. Watching Ethan with her daughter, Amelia felt her heart swell with emotions she'd been trying to suppress. This man had walked into their lives like an angel, saving them both in ways that went far beyond money and medical bills. He looked at Sophie with such pure love and pride, as if she were his own child, and Sophie bloomed under his attention like a flower in sunlight. Mr. Ethan, Sophie said seriously, settling onto his lap with the comfort of a child who had never doubted her welcome. When Mama gets better, will you still visit us? I don't want you to disappear like other people do. The innocence of her question, laced with the fear of abandonment that came from her father's rejection, nearly broke Ethan's heart. Princess, I'm not going anywhere. Wild horses couldn't drag me away from you and your mama. Promise? Sophie insisted, her brown eyes searching his face for any sign of deception. I promise, Ethan said solemnly, sealing the vow with a gentle kiss to her forehead. As the days passed, Ethan and Amelia's relationship deepened beyond the gratitude of patient and benefactor into something profound and undeniable. Their conversations revealed remarkable compatibility. Both were passionate about education, literature, and dreams of making the world better for children. Ethan found himself sharing parts of his soul he'd never revealed to anyone, while Amelia opened her heart to this man who had proven his character through actions rather than words. I need to ask you something, Ethan said one evening as they sat together in the hospital garden, Sophie playing nearby under the watchful eye of a nurse, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Amelia tensed, wondering if he'd discovered something about her past that would change his opinion of her. What is it? I'm falling in love with you, Ethan said simply, his blue eyes intense as they searched her face. Not just with your beauty or your grace, but with your strength, your intelligence, the way you've raised Sophie to be such an incredible child, despite every obstacle. I'm falling in love with your heart, Amelia, and I need to know if there's any chance you could feel the same way about me. The honesty in his voice took Amelia's breath away. She had been fighting her growing feelings for weeks, telling herself that gratitude was being confused with love, that a man like Ethan could never truly care for a poor single mother. But looking into his eyes now, seeing the vulnerability and hope there, she couldn't deny the truth any longer. I'm terrified, she whispered honestly. I'm terrified because I'm falling in love with you too. And I don't understand how someone like you could want someone like me. Someone like you? Ethan repeated, moving closer to her on the garden bench. Amelia, you're the strongest, most beautiful woman I've ever met. You've raised an incredible daughter while battling a life-threatening illness. You've taught me what real courage looks like. Before Amelia could protest or voice more of her insecurities, Ethan's lips found hers in a kiss that shattered every wall she'd built around her heart. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, then deeper as she melted against him. It was filled with weeks of suppressed longing, with the promise of a love that could heal old wounds and create new dreams. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily, and Amelia saw her own overwhelming love reflected in Ethan's eyes. I love you too, she whispered, the words torn from her soul before she could stop them. God help me. I love you too. Ethan's smile was radiant as he pulled her into his arms, careful of her healing incisions. Then that's all that matters. Everything else we can figure out together. But Ethan, you don't understand the complications, Amelia began, thinking of their different social classes, her medical bills, the challenges of blending their lives. I understand that I found the woman I want to spend my life with. Ethan interrupted gently. I understand that I want to be Sophie's father in every way that matters. I understand that before I met you, I was just existing, and now I'm truly living. As Ethan held her close in the hospital garden, with Sophie playing nearby and the future stretching before them like a beautiful dream, Amelia allowed herself to believe in fairy tales and happy endings. She had no way of knowing that their love was about to face its greatest test, or that sometimes the very trust we place in love becomes the weapon that nearly destroys us. But for now, wrapped in Ethan's arms with their daughter's laughter filling the air, Amelia believed that love really could conquer all obstacles, heal all wounds, and create the family they both desperately longed for. Chapter 4. Building Heaven on Earth. Ethan had transformed from a lonely billionaire into a man intoxicated by love and purpose. Every morning brought anticipation of seeing Amelia's radiant smile and Sophie's excited chatter, and every evening found him reluctant to leave the modest apartment where his heart had found its home. But beneath their growing happiness, Amelia carried a secret weight, the knowledge that their different worlds might not blend as easily as their hearts had. More than romantic love, Ethan had discovered something he'd never expected, the profound joy of being a father figure to Sophie. The 9-year-old had attached herself to him with the complete trust that only children possess, and Ethan found himself planning his entire life around her needs and happiness. Surprise. Ethan called out as he entered the small apartment that Amelia and Sophie had been staying in since her discharge from the hospital. His arms were laden with shopping bags, and his face glowed with the kind of joy that comes from having someone to spoil with love. Ethan, Sophie squealed, launching herself into his arms with the uninhibited affection that always made his heart swell. Over the past 2 months, she had begun calling him by his first name at his gentle insistence, though he secretly hoped that someday she might choose to call him something more paternal. What did you bring us? Patience, princess. Ethan laughed, spinning her around before setting her down gently. First, I need to talk to your mama about something very important. Amelia emerged from the small kitchen, and Ethan's breath caught in his throat, as it did every time he saw her. She was radiant with health now, her dark hair shining like silk, and her brown eyes sparkling with life and love. She wore a simple sundress that Ethan had bought her the week before, and she looked more beautiful than any supermodel who had ever graced a magazine cover. You're spoiling us again, Amelia said with a mixture of gratitude and gentle reproach, though her smile betrayed how much she loved his thoughtfulness. Ethan, you can't keep buying us things. You've already given us more than we could ever deserve. Ethan crossed the room in 3 quick strides and pulled her into his arms, not caring that Sophie was watching with delighted giggles. The feel of Amelia in his embrace still sent electricity through his entire body, and he knew he would never tire of holding her close. Amelia, my love, when are you going to understand that I don't do any of this because I think you owe me something? I do it because seeing you and Sophie happy is the only thing that makes my life worth living. He kissed her then, soft and tender at first, then deeper as she melted against him. Even after 2 months of stolen kisses and passionate embraces, Ethan still felt that same electric shock every time their lips met. It was as if his soul recognized hers, as if they were 2 halves of the same heart finally reunited. Oh, gross, Sophie giggled from behind them, though her eyes sparkled with happiness. Are you going to marry my mama so you can kiss her all the time? Ethan and Amelia broke apart, both laughing at Sophie's innocent question, but Ethan's eyes grew serious as he looked into Amelia's face, seeing his own overwhelming love reflected there along with something else, hope, anticipation, and perhaps a touch of fear. Actually, princess, Ethan said, never taking his eyes off Amelia, that's exactly what I want to talk to your mama about. Amelia's heart began to race as Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her hands flew to her mouth as tears immediately sprang to her eyes, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening. Amelia Carter, Ethan said, dropping to one knee right there in the middle of their tiny living room. "2 months ago, you and Sophie saved my life, just as surely as I helped save yours. You showed me what love really means, what it feels like to have a family, what it means to wake up every morning with purpose and joy filling my heart." Sophie bounced excitedly beside them, clapping her hands together as she watched the most romantic moment she'd ever witnessed. Her face glowed with pure delight, as if all her secret wishes were coming true. "I love you with every breath in my body," Ethan continued, his voice thick with emotion that made his words tremble. "I love your strength, your grace, your fierce devotion to Sophie. I love the way you make me laugh, the way you challenge my mind, the way you make me want to be a better man every single day. And I love Sophie as if she were my own daughter, because in my heart, she already is." At those words, Amelia felt her heart both soar and ache simultaneously. Ethan's love for Sophie was genuine and profound, and watching them together had been one of the greatest joys of her life. He had never once asked about Sophie's biological father beyond that first conversation, never seemed to care that she wasn't his blood. He simply loved her completely and unconditionally. Ethan opened the velvet box to reveal the most stunning diamond ring Amelia had ever seen. To perfect 3-carat solitaire surrounded by smaller diamonds that caught the afternoon light and scattered rainbows across the room. It was elegant and timeless, exactly the kind of ring she would have chosen for herself if she dared to dream so big. "Will you marry me, Amelia? Will you let me spend the rest of my life loving you and Sophie? Will you make me the happiest man alive by becoming my wife and letting me become Sophie's father in every way that matters?" Amelia looked down at this incredible man who had saved their lives, who loved them both so completely, who was offering her a fairy tale, ending she'd never dared to hope for. The love shining in his eyes was so pure, so genuine, that it took her breath away. "Yes," she whispered through her tears of joy. "Yes, Ethan, I'll marry you." Ethan's face lit up with pure euphoria as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then swept her into his arms and spun her around the room. Sophie cheered and danced around them, and for a few perfect moments, they were simply a family celebrating their love and their future together. "There's more," Ethan said breathlessly, when he finally set Amelia down, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "I know this apartment has been good to you, but I want to give you and Sophie a real home. I want us to build a life together in a place that belongs to all of us." He led them to the window and pointed outside, where a sleek black car waited with a driver. "I want to show you something that I hope will become our sanctuary, our haven, the place where we'll raise our children and grow old together." The drive through Manhattan's most exclusive neighborhood took 30 minutes, during which Ethan held Amelia's hand and listened to Sophie chatter excitedly about wedding plans and whether she could be the flower girl. When they finally stopped in front of a magnificent brownstone house with a private garden, Amelia gasped in amazement. "Ethan, what is this place?" "This is our home," Ethan said simply, his voice filled with love and hope. "If you like it, of course. It has 6 bedrooms, a library where Sophie can do her homework and read all the books her heart desires, a garden where we can have picnics and tea parties, and a master suite where we can start our life together as husband and wife." Amelia felt overwhelmed by his generosity, by the depth of his love, by the beautiful future he was painting for them. "Ethan, it's too much. It's too expensive, too grand for people like us." "People like us?" Ethan repeated, turning to face her with gentle intensity. "Amelia, we're going to be a family. This house means nothing without you and Sophie to fill it with love and laughter." He added with a playful smile, "Besides, I have it on good authority that princesses need castles." As they toured the magnificent home, Ethan's joy was infectious and overwhelming. He showed them every room with the enthusiasm of a child on Christmas morning, already planning where Sophie's toys would go, where they would read bedtime stories, where he and Amelia would share quiet moments as husband and wife. His vision of their future was so detailed, so filled with love, that Amelia found herself believing in happily ever after. In the master bedroom, with its breathtaking view of the private garden, Ethan pulled Amelia into his arms again and spoke words that would echo in her heart forever. "I have one more surprise," he said softly, his voice filled with emotion. "I've been working with the best family lawyers in the city to prepare adoption papers for Sophie. I want to be her father officially, legally. I want her to carry my name and know that she's loved and protected forever. Amelia's heart pounded as she realized the beautiful gift Ethan was offering, not just to her but to Sophie. Her daughter would finally have a father who chose her, who wanted her, who would never abandon her or make her feel unwanted. "She already loves you like a father," Amelia whispered, tears streaming down her face. "And I love you more than I ever thought it was possible to love another human being." Their kiss was passionate and desperate, filled with promises of forever and dreams of the family they would build together. As Ethan held her close in their future bedroom, Amelia made a silent vow to be the wife and mother this incredible man deserved, to fill their home with joy and laughter, and to love him with every fiber of her being for the rest of her life. But as they stood there, planning their perfect future, neither of them knew that forces were already in motion that would test their love in ways they couldn't imagine, and that sometimes the very happiness we fight so hard to build becomes the target that others seek to destroy. Chapter 5. The Wedding of Souls. The morning of their wedding dawned crisp and golden, with autumn leaves dancing on gentle breezes. Central Park had been transformed into an intimate ceremony space, with white roses creating an aisle leading to an altar framed by towering oak trees whose leaves had turned brilliant amber and gold. Yet, as stunning as the setting was, Amelia's heart carried a bittersweet weight. This fairy tale felt almost too good to be true, and she couldn't shake the fear that happiness this profound might be fragile. Ethan stood at the altar, in his perfectly tailored black tuxedo, his hands trembling slightly with nervous excitement as he watched the gathering crowd. But his eyes kept searching for only two faces: his bride, and the little girl who would soon officially become his daughter. The past month of wedding planning had been a whirlwind of joy, but more importantly, it had solidified his bond with Sophie in ways that went far beyond legal paperwork. "Nervous?" asked his best friend and business partner, Lucas Wong, who stood beside him as best man. Terrified, Ethan admitted with a laugh that was equal parts joy and anticipation. "I've negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, but the thought of promising my life to Amelia and Sophie has me shaking like a leaf." "I've never seen you this happy, Ethan," Lucas observed with a warm smile. 3 months ago, you were a workaholic who lived in his office. Now look at you. You're about to marry the woman of your dreams and become a father. It's like watching someone come alive." The string quartet began to play the opening notes of the processional, and Ethan's breath caught as he saw Sophie appear at the head of the aisle. She looked like a princess in her flowing white dress, her dark curls crowned with a wreath of baby's breath and white roses. In her small hands, she carried a basket of rose petals, but her face was glowing with pure joy and excitement as she began her walk down the aisle. Ethan felt tears spring to his eyes as he watched this beautiful child, his daughter in every way, that mattered scatter rose petals with such careful precision and obvious pride. Over the past month, as they'd planned this wedding together, Sophie had insisted on being involved in every detail. She'd helped choose the flowers, tasted the cake samples, and even had input on the wedding vows. Her enthusiasm and joy had made Ethan realize that this wedding wasn't just about him and Amelia, it was about the three of them becoming an official family. When Sophie reached the altar, she looked up at Ethan with those familiar brown eyes and whispered, "You look handsome, Daddy Ethan. Mama's going to be so happy." The word daddy hit Ethan like a physical blow to his heart. Over the past weeks, Sophie had begun using the term more frequently, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as Ethan reassured her that nothing would make him happier than being her father. Ethan knelt down and pulled Sophie into a fierce hug, not caring that 200 wedding guests were watching him cry. "I love you too, Princess, more than all the stars in the sky." "I love you too, Daddy," Sophie whispered back, and Ethan felt his heart expand until he thought it might burst from pure happiness. Then the wedding march began, and Ethan's world stopped completely. Amelia appeared at the head of the aisle like a vision from heaven itself. Her wedding dress was a masterpiece of silk and French lace that Ethan had insisted on having custom-made by the finest designers in Paris. It hugged her curves perfectly before flowing into a train that seemed to float behind her like a cloud. Her dark hair was swept into an elegant updo, with tendrils framing her face, and the antique diamond tiara that had belonged to Ethan's grandmother sparkled like stars against her hair. But it was her face that took Ethan's breath away completely. She was radiant with happiness. Her brown eyes locked on his as she walked toward him with a smile that could have powered the entire city. Every step brought her closer to becoming his wife, closer to the life they would build together, closer to the forever that Ethan had never believed in until he found her. As Amelia's man who had raised her after her parents died in a car accident when she was 16, placed her hand in Ethan's, the older man whispered, "Take care of my girls, Ethan. They're precious beyond measure." "With my life," Ethan replied solemnly, his voice thick with emotion as he squeezed Amelia's hand. The ceremony began with words of love and commitment that seemed to wrap around Ethan and Amelia like golden threads, binding their hearts together for eternity. But when it came time for their personal vows, both bride and groom were overcome with emotion that made their words even more powerful. "Amelia," Ethan began, his voice shaking as he looked into her eyes, "3 months ago, I was a man who had everything money could buy but nothing that truly mattered. Then you and Sophie walked into my life and showed me what it means to truly live, to love, to have a purpose beyond accumulating wealth and power." He paused, fighting back tears as he continued. "You taught me that love isn't just an emotion, it's a choice, a commitment, a promise to stand by someone through every storm and celebrate with them through every joy. You've given me the greatest gift, imaginable, family, a home, a reason to be better than I ever thought I could be." Ethan's voice grew stronger as he spoke from his heart. "I promise to love you with every breath in my body, to protect you and Sophie with my life, and to spend every day proving that I'm worthy of the incredible love you've shown me. I promise to be the husband you deserve and the father Sophie needs, not because of biology, but because of choice, because I choose you both today and every day for the rest of my life." Amelia was crying openly now, her heart breaking and soaring simultaneously, as she listened to the man she loved, promised to protect and cherish the daughter he'd chosen as his own. "Ethan," she began, her voice barely above a whisper but carrying clearly in the hushed silence, "you saved my life in every way possible. You gave me hope when I had none, love when I thought I'd never find it again, and a future brighter than any dream I'd ever dared to dream." Her voice grew stronger as she continued, her love giving her courage. "You've shown Sophie what it means to have a father's love, and you've shown me what it means to be cherished, to be valued, to be seen as worthy of the kind of love I only read about in fairy tales. You chose us when you had no obligation to do so, and that choice means more to me than any words can express." Amelia's tears flowed freely as she made her own promises. "I promise to love you with all my heart, to stand by your side through whatever challenges life brings, and to spend every day of my life grateful for the miracle of finding you. I promise to be the wife who supports your dreams, the partner who shares your burdens, and the woman who loves you not for what you can provide, but for who you are, the most generous, loving, wonderful man I've ever known." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan's kiss was passionate and tender, filled with promises of forever and dreams of the beautiful life they would share. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Ethan and Amelia were lost in their own world, seeing only each other and the love that connected their souls. But the most emotional moment came when the minister called for the adoption ceremony that would legally make Ethan Sophie's father. As Ethan knelt before Sophie and promised to love, protect, and guide her for the rest of his life, there wasn't a dry eye in the gathering. "Do you, Sophie Carter, accept Ethan Bennett as your father?" the minister asked gently. "Yes," Sophie said with such enthusiasm that the entire crowd burst into laughter and applause. "I've been waiting my whole life for a daddy like him." Ethan officially signed the adoption papers with tears streaming down his face, and when Sophie threw her arms around his neck and whispered, "I love you, Daddy," he knew that this moment would be etched in his heart forever. The reception was a celebration of pure joy and love. Ethan and Amelia danced their first dance to "At Last" by Etta James, holding each other close as they swayed to music that seemed to speak directly to their hearts. When the song ended, Ethan surprised everyone by asking Sophie to join them for the next dance, lifting her onto his feet so she could dance with both her parents. "Are we a real family now?" Sophie asked as they swayed together on the dance floor, her small arms wrapped around both Ethan and Amelia. "We've always been a real family, Princess," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. "Now it's just official. Now the whole world knows that we belong together." As the evening progressed, Ethan found quiet moments to present Amelia with one more surprise, a necklace that had belonged to his mother. a delicate chain with a heart-shaped pendant that sparkled with diamonds and sapphires. "She would have loved you and Sophie so much," Ethan said softly as he fastened the necklace around Amelia's neck. "I know she's watching over us today, blessing our family." Later that night, in their honeymoon suite overlooking Central Park, Ethan and Amelia made love with a passion that seemed to set their very souls on fire. Every touch, every kiss, every whispered word of love seemed to bind them closer together, creating a connection that felt unbreakable and eternal. "I have something to tell you," Amelia whispered, as they lay entwined afterward, her head resting on Ethan's chest as his fingers traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "What is it, my love?" Ethan asked softly, pressing a kiss to the top of her head, completely content in this moment of perfect happiness. Amelia took a deep breath and smiled as she shared the news that would make their joy complete. "I'm pregnant, Ethan. We're going to have a baby." Ethan's response was immediate and overwhelming. He rolled her onto her back and kissed her deeply, his hands moving to her still flat stomach with reverent wonder. "Really? We're going to have a baby?" "Yes," Amelia laughed through happy tears. "Sophie is going to be a big sister." Ethan's joy was so pure, so overwhelming, that Amelia felt her heart might burst from the beauty of this moment. They had found love, created a family, and now they were bringing new life into the world together. As they fell asleep in each other's arms, their future stretching before them like a beautiful dream, neither Ethan nor Amelia could imagine that their perfect happiness had already attracted the attention of someone who would stop at nothing to destroy it, and that sometimes the very love that makes us strongest also makes us most vulnerable to those who would use our hearts against us. Chapter 6. The Heart. Crushing Betrayal. 3 blissful weeks had passed since Ethan and Amelia's fairy tale wedding, and their honeymoon in Paris had been everything dreams were made of. They had strolled hand in hand along the Seine, made love under the Eiffel Tower's golden lights, and planned their future with the innocent joy of two souls who believed their love could conquer anything. Ethan had never been happier, and Amelia had flourished under his devotion, glowing with the early stages of pregnancy and the security of knowing she and Sophie were finally safe and loved. But Margaret Langley Bennett had been using their absence to orchestrate the most devastating betrayal of Ethan's life. Margaret sat in her opulent Manhattan penthouse, her cold blue eyes studying the fabricated documents spread across her mahogany desk, like a general planning a war. At 62, she remained strikingly beautiful in an ice queen way, but her heart had been frozen solid by decades of calculating ambition and bitter resentment. She had married Ethan's father for his money, tolerated Ethan for the inheritance she expected to receive, and now watched in growing horror as her stepson threatened to give away millions to what she saw as undeserving strangers. The real catalyst for her desperation wasn't just greed, it was the private investigator's report she'd commissioned the day after Ethan's wedding. Margaret had expected to find dirt on Amelia's past, something she could use to expose her as a gold digger. Instead, she discovered something far more threatening. Ethan had already changed his will to include Amelia and Sophie, making them primary beneficiaries of his $12 billion empire. If Amelia had more children with Ethan, Margaret's own inheritance would shrink to almost nothing. Mrs. Bennett, her private investigator, Gregory Pierce, said as he entered her study, carrying a thick manila folder, "I have the evidence you requested. The fabrication is comprehensive." Margaret's perfectly manicured fingers traced the edges of the documents that Pierce had spent weeks creating with the help of corrupt contacts in various industries. Bank records showing Amelia had researched Ethan's net worth months before they supposedly met. Medical records suggesting she had deliberately induced her own heart condition using black market drugs. Hospital staff willing to swear they'd seen Amelia coaching Sophie on how to act around wealthy men. And most damning of all, staged photographs showing Amelia meeting with known gold diggers who specialized in targeting billionaires. "These are perfect," Margaret said with cold satisfaction, her voice like Arctic wind. "The story is completely believable. Desperate single mother researches wealthy targets, makes herself sick to gain sympathy, uses innocent child as emotional leverage to trap a billionaire into marriage and adoption." "Are you certain you want to proceed?" Pierce asked hesitantly, despite the substantial payment he'd already received. "Mr. Bennett seems genuinely happy, and the child is innocent in all this." "The child is a tool being used to manipulate my stepson," Margaret snapped, her mask of civility, slipping to reveal the cold calculation beneath. Ethan is worth $12 billion, Mr. Pierce. I will not stand by and watch some nobody from the streets steal what rightfully belongs to the Bennett family legacy. What made Margaret's deception so cruel was how thoroughly she had researched Amelia's actual past to make the lies believable. She knew about Amelia's real financial struggles, her genuine medical condition, her authentic love for Sophie, but Margaret twisted every truth into a weapon, turning Amelia's greatest strength, her devotion to her daughter, and her gratitude for Ethan's help into evidence of manipulation and deceit. The trap was set for Ethan's return from his honeymoon. Ethan walked into his office that Monday morning, feeling like he could conquer the world. His assistant had mentioned that Margaret wanted to see him urgently, but nothing could dampen his spirits. In just a few hours, he would be home with his beautiful wife and daughter, and tonight they planned to tell Sophie about the baby. Life had never felt more perfect or full of promise. "Ethan, darling," Margaret said as she glided into his office with her usual theatrical grace, her expression a carefully crafted mask of concerned affection. "Welcome home. How was Paris?" "Perfect," Ethan replied, his face glowing with happiness as he showed her photos on his phone of him, Amelia, and Sophie at various Parisian landmarks. "Absolutely perfect, Margaret. I know you had your concerns about my marriage, but I hope you can see how happy Amelia and Sophie make me. They're my whole world now." Margaret's smile was as sharp as a blade, and Ethan caught something cold in her eyes that made him uneasy. "That's actually what I wanted to discuss with you, dear. I'm afraid I have some very disturbing information that's come to light while you were away." Ethan frowned, his happiness dimming as he sensed the shift in Margaret's demeanor. "What kind of information?" Margaret placed the thick manila folder on his desk with theatrical precision, her movements calculated for maximum psychological impact. "I hired a private investigator to do a thorough background check on your new wife. What we discovered is, well, it's quite shocking." "Margaret, I told you that wasn't necessary," Ethan said, irritation creeping into his voice as he stared at the folder. "I trust Amelia completely. She's the most honest, genuine person I've ever met." "Open the folder, Ethan." Something in Margaret's tone made Ethan's blood run cold. With trembling hands that he tried to keep steady, he opened the folder and found himself staring at documents that made his world tilt on its axis. The first document was a series of bank records showing that someone with Amelia's social security number had been researching Ethan's net worth, his business holdings, even his personal habits, months before their supposed first meeting. The records showed searches for richest single men in New York and how to meet wealthy men, all traced back to computer accounts linked to Amelia's identity. "This can't be right," Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible as his hands shook. "Amelia would never. I'm afraid there's more," Margaret said, her tone dripping with false sympathy that barely concealed her satisfaction. The next documents were medical records that suggested Amelia had been obtaining medication that could induce heart problems, with timestamps showing she'd been taking these drugs for weeks before her supposed sudden heart failure. Expert medical testimony indicated that her condition could have been artificially created to manipulate sympathy from potential targets. Ethan felt physically sick as he turned to testimonials from hospital staff claiming they'd witnessed Amelia coaching Sophie on how to act around wealthy men, how to appear pathetic and needy, how to call potential father figures daddy to maximize emotional manipulation. But it was the final set of photographs that destroyed him completely. The images showed Amelia in what appeared to be a cafe, sitting across from two women who were known in certain circles as professional gold diggers who taught classes on how to target wealthy men. The photos were timestamped just 1 week before Ethan had first found Sophie in his office. In the staged photographs, it looked like Amelia was receiving coaching on how to use children as emotional leverage, how to fake medical emergencies for maximum sympathy, how to research targets and stage accidental meetings. "No," Ethan breathed, his hands shaking so violently he could barely hold the photographs. His world was crumbling around him, as every beautiful memory of the past 3 months was reframed as calculated manipulation. "This isn't possible. Amelia loves me. She would never—" "I know this is painful, darling," Margaret said, moving around the desk to place what she intended to appear as a comforting hand on his shoulder. "But you have to face the truth. This woman researched you, targeted you, and used that innocent child to manipulate your emotions. She made herself sick on purpose. knowing your heroic nature would compel you to save her. She played you perfectly, Ethan. Ethan stared at the evidence spread before him, his mind reeling as he tried to process what he was seeing. The bank records showing Amelia had researched his wealth, the medical evidence suggesting she had induced her own illness, the photographs showing her meeting with known gold diggers, the hospital testimonies claiming she had coached Sophie to manipulate him. The adoption papers, Ethan said suddenly, his voice hollow with devastating realization. She let me adopt Sophie, let me fall in love with someone else's child, knowing it was all a lie. She used your love against you, Margaret confirmed, twisting the knife deeper with every word. She knew you would do anything to protect a child. So she used Sophie as bait to trap you into marriage and legal financial responsibility. Even now, she's pregnant with your child, ensuring a permanent claim on your fortune. Ethan felt something inside him break not just his heart, but his very soul. The love he had felt for Amelia and Sophie, the family he thought they had built together, the future he had dreamed of, all of it had been a lie. He had been played for a fool by a woman who saw him as nothing more than a bank account with a heartbeat, who had used an innocent child as a weapon to extract his money and his love. I need to go home, Ethan said, his voice dead and emotionless as he stood up from his desk, the evidence of his betrayal scattered before him like the remnants of his shattered dreams. Ethan, what are you going to do? Margaret asked, working hard to keep the satisfaction out of her voice. What I should have done before I let my emotions cloud my judgment, Ethan replied coldly, his heart turning to ice as the full magnitude of the deception hit him. I'm going to end this charade before it destroys what's left of my life. As Ethan left his office, Margaret smiled with cruel triumph. She had successfully destroyed her stepson's happiness and eliminated the threat to her inheritance. She didn't care that she had just shattered 3 innocent lives: a man who had found true love, a woman who had loved him faithfully, and a child who was about to lose the only father she had ever known. The evidence was overwhelming, professional, and completely fabricated, but Margaret had crafted her lies so skillfully, weaving truth with fiction so expertly, that even a man as intelligent as Ethan couldn't see through the deception when his wounded heart was crying out for someone to blame for the pain he felt. Ethan drove home through the Manhattan traffic, his heart turning to stone with every mile. The evidence was undeniable, overwhelming. He had been the victim of the most sophisticated con game he had ever encountered. And the worst part was that he had fallen for it completely. He had given his heart, his name, and his fortune to a woman who had never loved him at all. When he walked through the door of their beautiful home, he found Amelia in the garden, her hand resting protectively over her growing belly as she watched Sophie play among the roses he had planted for them. She looked up at him with such radiant love and joy that, for a moment, Ethan almost believed the evidence was wrong. But then he remembered the bank records, the medical reports, the photographs, and his heart hardened into stone. "Ethan!" Amelia called out happily, running to him with arms outstretched, her face glowing with the news she was excited to share. "You're home early. I have something wonderful to tell you about the baby." "We need to talk," Ethan said coldly, stepping away from her embrace like her touch burned him now. Chapter 7. Shattered Lives. The confrontation that followed would haunt all 3 of them for the rest of their lives. Amelia stood in their beautiful living room, her face glowing with the joy of early motherhood and excitement about sharing her latest doctor's appointment with Ethan. She wore the soft blue dress that he had bought her in Paris, and her hand kept drifting to her stomach, where their second child was growing. She had no idea that her world was about to be destroyed by lies so elaborate and convincing that even the man who loved her would believe them. "Ethan, darling, what's wrong?" Amelia asked, concern creeping into her voice as she noticed the cold fury in his eyes. He looked like a stranger, the warm, loving man who had left for work that morning replaced by someone she didn't recognize. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I've seen the truth," Ethan said, his voice like winter wind, as he threw the manila folder onto the coffee table with such force that its contents scattered across the surface. "All of it. Amelia, every calculated move, every manipulated tear, every perfectly staged moment, designed to make me fall in love with a lie." Amelia stared at the scattered documents, her face going pale as she recognized what Margaret had done. The fabricated bank records, the false medical reports, the staged photographs. It was a masterpiece of deception designed to destroy everything she held dear. Her legs felt weak as she realized the magnitude of the trap that had been set for them. "Ethan, please, let me explain," Amelia said desperately, reaching for him with trembling hands. "These documents are fake. Someone is trying to destroy us. You have to believe none of this is real." "Believe you?" Ethan laughed bitterly, stepping away from her touch as if it contaminated him. "Believe the woman who researched my net worth before we ever met? Believe the woman who deliberately made herself sick to manipulate my sympathy? Believe the woman who coached an innocent child to call me daddy so I'd fall deeper into your trap? I never researched you," Amelia cried out, her heart breaking as she realized how thoroughly Margaret had planned this destruction. "Ethan, I'd never even heard your name before that night when you found Sophie cleaning your office. Someone has fabricated all of this." "The evidence is overwhelming, Amelia," Ethan said, his voice cracking despite his attempt to remain cold. "Bank records, medical reports, witness testimonies, photographs, it's all here in black and white. You targeted me, researched me, made yourself sick to gain my sympathy, and used Sophie as emotional leverage to trap me into marriage." Amelia felt the room spinning around her as she realized how skillfully Margaret had woven truth and lies together. The fabricated evidence was so detailed, so convincing, that even she might have believed it if she hadn't known the truth. "Ethan, you know me. You know my heart. Do you really think I'm capable of something so calculated and cruel?" "I thought I knew you," Ethan replied, his voice hollow with pain and betrayal. "But apparently, everything I fell in love with was an act the grateful single mother, the devoted daughter, the woman who claimed to love me. It was all a performance designed to open my wallet." "Daddy, Ethan, Mama," Sophie's voice called from the garden door, where she stood with a bouquet of roses she had picked for them. Her face was bright with happiness, completely unaware that the family she adored was about to be torn apart. "Why are you shouting? Are you playing a game?" Ethan looked at this beautiful child he had loved as his own daughter, and now all he could see was Margaret's evidence, the coaching sessions, the manipulated emotions, the calculated use of an innocent child as a weapon against his heart. The pain of that realization was almost unbearable. "Don't call me that," Ethan said, his voice hollow rather than cruel. The words felt like glass in his throat, and he watched Sophie's face crumble with devastating effect. Even as he spoke, something deep inside screamed that this was wrong, that he was destroying something precious and irreplaceable. But the evidence seemed overwhelming, and his wounded pride demanded protection. "Ethan, please," Amelia sobbed, pulling Sophie protectively against her side. "Don't take your anger at me out on her. She's innocent. She loves you. She's done exactly what you trained her to do," Ethan replied, his voice breaking despite his attempt to remain cold. "She made me fall in love with her so you could get your hands on my money." "She's just a child," Amelia screamed, her composure finally breaking completely as she watched the man she loved destroy their daughter's heart with lies and accusations. "She doesn't even understand what money means. All she knows is that she loves you, and you're breaking her heart. Then you should have thought of that before you used her as bait in your con game," Ethan said, turning away because he couldn't bear to see the devastation in Sophie's eyes. "I want you both out," Ethan continued, his voice deadly calm as he fought against the part of his heart that was screaming at him to stop, to hold them, to believe in their love despite the evidence. "Pack whatever belongs to you and leave. I never want to see either of you again." "Ethan, you can't mean that," Amelia whispered, clutching Sophie tighter as the child sobbed against her shoulder. "We're married. I'm pregnant with your child. This is our home, our family." "This was never your home," Ethan said, each word carefully chosen to inflict maximum damage. "It was a stage set for your performance. And now the show is over. You're nothing but a gold-digging con artist who used an innocent child to manipulate a man's heart for money." The words hit Amelia like physical blows, each one designed to wound as deeply as possible. She could see in Ethan's eyes that Margaret's poison had worked perfectly. The man she loved with all her heart now looked at her with contempt and disgust. "Daddy, Ethan, please," Sophie sobbed, breaking free from her mother's arms to run to the man she adored. "I'm sorry if I was bad. Please don't make us go away. I love you so much." Ethan's heart shattered as this beautiful child, innocent in all of this manipulation, begged him not to abandon her. But the evidence was overwhelming, and his wounded pride demanded protection from further deception. "I'm not your daddy," Ethan said, the words tearing his soul apart even as he spoke them. "I never was. That was just part of your mother's game." Sophie's cry of anguish echoed through the house like the sound of innocence dying. But Ethan forced himself to remain unmoved, convinced that even her pain was part of the elaborate deception. Amelia gathered her sobbing daughter and stumbled upstairs to pack their few belongings, her hands shaking so badly she could barely function. She was 6 months pregnant, heartbroken beyond repair, and about to become homeless with a traumatized 9-year-old child. But even worse than her own pain was watching Sophie's world collapse around her. "Mama, why doesn't Daddy Ethan love us anymore?" Sophie asked through her tears as Amelia packed their clothes with mechanical movements, her mind struggling to process the magnitude of what was happening. "He does love us, baby," Amelia lied, her own tears making it hard to see. "He's just confused right now. Someone told him lies about us, and he believes them instead of believing in our love." "But we didn't do anything wrong," Sophie whispered, her young mind unable to comprehend how love could turn to hatred so quickly. "We just loved him. Why is that bad?" Amelia had no answer for that question because there was no rational explanation for the cruelty they were experiencing. Margaret's lies had been so skillfully crafted that they had convinced an intelligent man to destroy his own happiness and break the hearts of the people who loved him most. An hour later, Amelia and Sophie stood on the sidewalk outside the house that had briefly been their home, their few possessions in a single suitcase. Ethan watched from the window as they walked away, his heart screaming at him to run after them, to pull them back into his arms and forgive everything. But his wounded pride was stronger than his love, and he let them disappear into the Manhattan evening. 4 years passed like a nightmare from which none of them could wake. Amelia gave birth to Ethan's son Noah in a charity hospital, alone and heartbroken. The delivery was complicated and dangerous, but she had no one to hold her hand through the pain except a kind nurse who stayed past her shift. When Noah took his first breath, Amelia wept, not just from joy but from the devastating knowledge that his father would never know him. She worked 3 jobs to support her children, cleaning offices at night while Noah slept in a makeshift bed in supply closets, waiting tables during the day while a neighbor watched him for minimal pay, and doing laundry on weekends with both children helping fold the endless piles. They lived in a tiny 1-bedroom apartment where the heat barely worked in winter and the air conditioning never worked in summer. Amelia would lie awake on the couch, listening to her children breathe in the bedroom, calculating whether she could afford both groceries and electricity that month. Some nights, when the bills piled too high and the refrigerator stood nearly empty, Amelia would sit in their tiny bathroom and cry silently, mourning not just their lost love, but the future that had been stolen from her children. She kept newspaper clippings about Ethan's business successes hidden in a shoebox knot out of longing, but as proof to show Noah someday that his father was a good man who had been deceived. The hardest part wasn't the poverty, it was watching her children suffer emotionally. Sophie grew from a heartbroken 9-year-old into a mature 13-year-old who rarely smiled and never spoke of the man she had called Daddy Ethan. She became fiercely protective of her mother and baby brother, taking on responsibilities no child should bear. When other kids at school talked about their fathers, Sophie would change the subject or simply walk away. She helped care for Noah with the devotion of a mother, teaching him to walk and talk while Amelia worked. But the light had gone out of her eyes the day Ethan rejected her. Noah grew up as a beautiful, intelligent little boy who looked exactly like his father, with Ethan's piercing blue eyes and stubborn chin. He would ask innocent questions like, "Why don't I have a daddy like other kids? And did my daddy not want me?" That broke Amelia's heart into smaller pieces each time. She kept one photo of Ethan hidden in her jewelry box, the only picture from their wedding day, and sometimes caught Noah staring at it with the intense curiosity of a child trying to understand his place in the world. "That's your daddy," she would whisper when she found him with the photo. "He loved us very much, but someone told him lies that made him forget how much we meant to each other." Ethan, meanwhile, had become a shell of his former self. He threw himself into work with obsessive intensity, building his empire ever larger while his personal life crumbled into dust. He drank too much, slept too little, and drove away anyone who tried to get close to him. He had built walls around his heart that nothing could penetrate, because he had learned that love was just another word for manipulation and betrayal. But late at night, when the alcohol couldn't numb the pain anymore, Ethan would find himself driving past the neighborhoods where he thought they might be living, hoping for a glimpse of the family he had destroyed. He never saw them because Amelia had deliberately moved them far from any place Ethan might look, but his heart never stopped searching for the love he had thrown away. Margaret had gotten exactly what she wanted. Ethan was alone, bitter, and focused solely on business, with no wife or children to threaten her inheritance. But even she sometimes wondered if the price of her victory had been too high when she saw the emptiness in her stepson's eyes, and realized that destroying his capacity for love had also destroyed the man she had helped raise. None of them knew that fate was preparing to bring them together again in the most devastating and beautiful way possible, and that sometimes the truth has a way of surfacing, even when it's been buried under years of lies and pain. The reckoning was coming, and when it arrived, it would shatter them all over again before finally setting them free. Chapter 8. The Devastating Truth. Ethan stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his 45th floor office, staring down at the bustling streets of Manhattan without really seeing them. 4 years had passed since he had thrown Amelia and Sophie out of his life. 4 years since he had discovered what he believed was the ultimate betrayal. Yet, despite all the evidence, despite all the reasons he had to hate them, his heart had never stopped aching for the family he had lost. At 38, Ethan was wealthier and more powerful than ever before, but success felt hollow when you had no one to share it with. His penthouse apartment was a monument to loneliness, filled with expensive art and furniture that no one ever enjoyed. He worked 18-hour days because sleep brought dreams of dark-haired little girls calling him daddy and beautiful women with sad brown eyes, who haunted his every waking moment. The irony wasn't lost on him that 2 years ago he had quietly acquired a private investigation firm that specialized in finding missing children and reuniting families. Ethan told himself it was just another business investment, but deep down, he knew he was searching for something or someone he couldn't name. Mr. Bennett. His assistant's voice came through the intercom, interrupting his brooding thoughts. Your 3 o'clock p.m. appointment is here. The emergency case you agreed to see. Ethan turned from the window and straightened his tie, preparing to meet with another desperate family whose child had gone missing. These cases always affected him more than he cared to admit, but he couldn't seem to stop taking them. Something about helping other people find their families felt like penance for the one he had destroyed. What he didn't expect was for his world to explode the moment the conference room doors opened. A woman entered first, her head down as she clutched a worn purse to her chest. She looked older, thinner, worn down by years of struggle that had etched lines of hardship into her once beautiful face. But when she raised her eyes to meet his, Ethan's heart stopped completely. Amelia. The recognition hit him like a physical blow. 4 years of trying to forget her face, and yet he knew those eyes instantly, the same warm brown that had haunted his dreams, now shadowed with pain and exhaustion. For a moment, time stood still as they stared at each other across the room, 4 years of separation and heartbreak hanging between them like a chasm. In that frozen moment, Ethan saw everything he had lost reflected in her eyes, the love they had shared, the family they had built, the future they had planned together. The sophisticated woman who had walked down the aisle in designer silk was gone, replaced by someone who had clearly fought every day just to survive. But it was the child who followed her that truly destroyed him. A boy, about 4 years old, with Ethan's own piercing blue eyes, his stubborn chin, and his unruly dark hair. The resemblance was so striking, so undeniable, that Ethan felt the breath leave his lungs. This was his son, the child Amelia had been carrying when he threw them out. The baby he'd never known existed. The little boy moved with unconscious confidence. Clearly beloved and well cared for, despite their obvious poverty. His clothes were clean but worn, his shoes scuffed but sturdy. Everything about him spoke of a mother who sacrificed everything to give her child what he needed, even when she had nothing left to give. "Mama, is this the man who helps find lost kids?" the little boy asked, his voice small and uncertain. Ethan couldn't speak. He was staring at a miniature version of himself, a child who should have grown up in his arms, who should have known his father's love from birth. The magnitude of what he'd lost, what they'd all lost, crashed over him like a tsunami. Amelia's face had gone chalk white. "Noah, sweetheart, maybe we should—" "Noah," Ethan whispered, the name like a prayer on his lips. His son, his beautiful, innocent son, who was meeting his father for the first time at 4 years old. "Find lost kids," Ethan managed to say, his voice thick with shock and overwhelming emotion. "What happened?" "My big sister got taken by bad men," Noah said simply, the way children state terrible facts. 3 whole days ago. Mama cried a lot. Ethan's world tilted as the implications hit him. Sophia's chosen daughter, the little girl who had called him daddy, with such pure love, was in danger. And this beautiful child, his own flesh and blood, was calling her his big sister. The irony was devastating. He was meeting his biological son for the first time because his adopted daughter was missing. "How old are you, Noah?" Ethan asked quietly, kneeling down to the child's level with trembling hands. He needed to hear it, needed the confirmation of what his heart already knew. 4 3/4, Noah replied proudly, holding up 4 small fingers and wiggling them. "I'll be 5 next month, on Valentine's Day. Mama says I'm getting bigger every day so I can protect her and Sophie better." Valentine's Day. Ethan's mind reeled as he did the math. The 14th of February would be exactly 9 months after he had thrown Amelia out of his life. 9 months after their wedding night, when she had tried to tell him something important and he had been too consumed with rage to listen. He looked up at Amelia, who was watching him with a mixture of desperate hope and paralyzing terror in her eyes. "He's mine, isn't he?" Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible. Amelia nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I tried to tell you that night, but you wouldn't listen. I was already 6 months pregnant when you threw us out." The room spun around Ethan as he realized the magnitude of what had happened. He had thrown out his pregnant wife and rejected his chosen daughter based on fabricated evidence. He had spent 4 years hating himself for loving them when he should have been protecting them. He had a son, a beautiful, innocent son, who had grown up in poverty while Ethan lived in wealth, believing lies about the only woman he had ever truly loved. "The DNA test," Ethan said suddenly, his voice shaking as pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. "The evidence Margaret showed, mate, was all fake, wasn't it?" "I don't know what evidence you're talking about," Amelia said quietly. "But I can tell you that I never researched you, never deliberately made myself sick, never coached Sophie to manipulate you. I loved you, Ethan. We both did, with all our hearts." Ethan stared at Noah, his son, his own flesh and blood, and felt 4 years of suppressed love and regret come crashing down on him like a tsunami. This beautiful child had grown up without knowing his father, had spent his entire life in poverty while Ethan lived in luxury, all because Ethan had been too proud and too hurt to question evidence that now seemed obviously fabricated. "Tell me about Sophie," Ethan said, forcing himself to focus on the immediate crisis while his heart shattered from the weight of his mistakes. "Tell me exactly what happened." Amelia wiped her tears and tried to compose herself, though her voice shook as she spoke. 3 days ago, she was walking to school when a van pulled up beside her. 3 men grabbed her and drove away. A witness saw them force her into the vehicle, but the license plate was fake. "Did they contact you? Demands for ransom?" Ethan asked, his mind already shifting into the analytical mode that had built his empire. "No contact at all," Amelia replied, her voice breaking. "The police aren't taking it seriously because we live in a bad neighborhood, and Sophie is just another poor kid to them. But I remembered hearing that you'd started helping families find missing children through your investigation firm. I know you hate us, Ethan. I know you never want to see us again. But Sophiesh never stopped loving you, even after everything that happened." Ethan felt his heart break all over again as he realized that Sophie, child he had chosen as his daughter, the little girl who had called him daddy with such pure love, had spent 4 years remembering him with affection, while he had spent those same years trying to forget her. "I need to see the police reports," Ethan said, his voice taking on the commanding tone that had built empires. "I need witness statements, security footage, everything. Noah, buddy, can you tell me exactly what your sister was wearing when she disappeared?" For the next hour, Ethan worked with the intensity of a man possessed, calling in favors from police contacts, accessing traffic cameras, and mobilizing his private security team, all the while Noah sat beside him, completely trusting that this stranger would bring his beloved sister home. Amelia watched with growing amazement as Ethan displayed the same protective intensity that had once saved her life. It was during this investigation that Ethan's head of security, Nathan Wong, made a discovery that changed everything. "Ethan," Nathan said quietly, pulling him aside while Amelia comforted Noah in the outer office. "I've been running background checks on everyone connected to your family from 4 years ago, trying to figure out who might have taken Sophie and why." "What did you find?" Ethan asked, though something in Nathan's expression told him he wasn't going to like the answer. "The DNA test, the financial records, the photographs, they were all fabricated by the same investigation firm, a company called Pierce Investigations, owned by Gregory Pierce." Ethan frowned, his blood starting to run cold. "I've never heard of them." "Because they went out of business 2 years ago," Nathan continued grimly. "But not before I tracked down Pierce himself in prison. He's serving time for fraud in an unrelated case. And when I mentioned your name, he started talking. Ethan, he admitted to everything. He was paid over $800,000 to fabricate evidence against Amelia." "Who hired him?" Ethan asked, though his heart was already providing the answer. "Margaret Langley Bennett, your stepmother." The revelation hit Ethan like a physical blow, but even worse was what Nathan said next. "There's more, Ethan. Pierce thinks Margaret might be behind Sophie's kidnapping too. He says she contacted him in prison last week through an intermediary, asking about permanent solutions to ongoing problems. When he refused to help, she apparently found other people willing to do the job." Ethan felt rage unlike anything he had ever experienced course through his vein. Margaret hadn't just destroyed his marriage and separated him from his children, she was now threatening Sophie's life to ensure her inheritance remained secure. "Find her," Ethan said, his voice deadly calm in the way that made seasoned businessmen tremble. "Find Margaret, find Pierce's contacts, and find my daughter. Use every resource we have, call in every favor, spend whatever it takes. I want Sophie home safe, and I want everyone responsible for this to pay." As his security team mobilized to search for Sophie, Ethan turned back to Amelia and Noah, his heart breaking as he saw the fear and exhaustion in their faces. "Amelia," he said softly, kneeling down, so he was at eye level with both her and Noah, "I need you to know something. I never stopped loving you not for a single day in 4 years. I was angry and hurt, and too proud to question the evidence, but I never stopped loving you or Sophie." "Daddy?" Noah said suddenly, his small hand reaching out to touch Ethan's face with innocent curiosity. "Are you my daddy? Mama showed me pictures, and you have the same eyes as me." Ethan's vision blurred with tears as he looked at his Santhis, beautiful, innocent child who was meeting his father for the first time at 4 years old. "Yes, buddy, I'm your daddy, and I'm going to bring your sister home." "I promise." "I knew it," Noah said with the delighted certainty of childhood. "I knew my daddy would come save Sophie. She always said you would come back someday." As Ethan held his son for the first time and looked into the eyes of the woman he had never stopped loving, he made a vow that would reshape his entire life. He would find Sophie, he would destroy everyone who had hurt his family, and he would spend the rest of his life making up for the 4 years he had lost with the people who meant everything to him. The truth had finally come to light, but now Ethan faced the greatest challenge of his life, saving his daughter and earning back the trust of the family he had destroyed with his own hands. Chapter 9. The Fight for Everything. The next 72 hours were the longest and most terrifying of Ethan's life. His entire business empire had been mobilized for one purpose: finding Sophie and bringing her home safely. Private security teams combed the city, hackers infiltrated surveillance networks, and every contact Ethan had accumulated over 15 years in business was called upon to help locate his missing daughter. But as each hour passed without a breakthrough, Ethan felt his sanity fraying at the edges. It was Noah who provided the crucial piece of information they desperately needed. "Daddy," the 4-year-old said as he sat in Ethan's office, carefully coloring a picture of his family that included a stick figure labeled "Daddy" in crayon. "The scary lady came to our house last week." Ethan, who had been pacing frantically while coordinating search efforts, stopped dead in his tracks. "What scary lady, buddy?" "The one with the white hair and mean eyes." Noah continued matter-of-factly, not looking up from his coloring. "She was talking to Mama about you, but Mama told her to go away because she was saying bad things. Amelia, who had been curled up in the corner of Ethan's office, pale with exhaustion and worry, looked up sharply. "Noah, what are you talking about? The old lady who said she was Daddy's other mama." Noah explained patiently, his small fingers gripping the crayon tightly. "She came when Sophie was at school. She said mean things about our family and tried to give Mama money to take us far away where Daddy could never find us." Ethan felt his blood turn to ice as he realized Margaret had found his family even before Sophie's disappearance. "Amelia, why didn't you tell me Margaret came to see you?" "Because you weren't speaking to us," Amelia replied quietly, her voice heavy with 4 years of pain, "and because she terrified me. There was something so cold, so calculating about her. She offered me $100,000 to disappear with the children and make sure you never found out about Noah." "What did you tell her?" Ethan asked, kneeling down beside Noah's chair while his heart pounded with fear for what Margaret might have done next. "I told her that Noah had a right to know his father and that you had a right to know about your son," Amelia said with quiet dignity that made Ethan's chest tighten with love and regret. She didn't like that answer. She said our family was a threat to everything the Bennett name represented. Ethan's phone rang at that moment, and Nathan Wong's urgent voice filled the room through the speaker. "Ethan, we found them. Margaret has Sophie at the old Bennett family estate in the Hamptons. Our surveillance team confirms she's alive, but they're preparing to move her tonight to a location we might never find." "I'm on my way," Ethan said, already reaching for his jacket as adrenaline flooded his system. "Ethan, wait," Nathan continued, his voice grim. "There's more. We intercepted communications that suggest this isn't just about money anymore. Margaret hired professional criminals, and they're planning to kill Sophie and make it look like a random crime. She wants to eliminate what she sees as the contamination of the Bennett family line permanently." The room fell silent as the full horror of Margaret's plan became clear. She hadn't just destroyed Ethan's marriage and separated him from his children. She was now planning to commit murder to ensure her vision of the Bennett family legacy remained intact. "That monster," Amelia whispered, her face going white with terror. "She's going to kill my baby because she can't stand the thought of Ethan loving children who aren't biologically his." "No," Ethan said with deadly calm, his voice carrying the steel that had built empires and destroyed enemies. "She's not going to touch one hair on Sophie's head. Nathan, coordinate with the FBI and local police. I want every road to that estate blocked, every exit covered. Amelia," he turned to the woman he loved, "you're coming with me." "Ethan, it's too dangerous," Amelia protested, though her maternal instincts were screaming at her to do whatever it took to save her daughter. "She's my daughter too," Ethan said firmly, his eyes blazing with protective fury. "I've lost 4 years with her because of Margaret's lies. I'm not losing another minute, and I'm not facing this without you. We're bringing our daughter home together." The drive to the Hamptons felt endless, though Ethan's driver made the trip in record time with police escorts clearing the way. During the journey, Ethan and Amelia talked more honestly than they had in 4 years, finally sharing the pain and loneliness they had both endured during their separation. "I used to drive past your old neighborhood," Ethan admitted quietly, holding Amelia's hand as they raced through the night. "Every night for months after you left, I kept telling myself I hated you, but I couldn't stop looking for you." "I know," Amelia replied, tears streaming down her face. "I saw you one night, parked across the street from our apartment building. You looked so lost, so broken. I wanted to run to you, to tell you the truth about everything, but I was terrified you'd reject us again." "I'm so sorry," Ethan said, his voice breaking with 4 years of suppressed guilt and regret. "I'm sorry I believed the lies. Sorry I threw away our family. Sorry I let my pride matter more than love. Can you ever forgive me?" "I forgave you years ago," Amelia replied honestly, her thumb tracing circles on his palm. The anger faded pretty quickly when I realized how completely we had been manipulated. "But Ethan, I need you to understand. Noah and Sophie have suffered because of this. Sophie spent years thinking her father abandoned her because she wasn't good enough. Noah has grown up in poverty, while his real father lived in luxury. Forgiveness is one thing, but rebuilding trust that's going to take time. I have the rest of my life to prove I'm worthy of your trust again," Ethan said, bringing her hand to his lips and pressing a gentle kiss to her palm. "I'll spend every day making up for the pain I caused our children." They arrived at the Bennett estate as storm clouds gathered overhead, the imposing mansion where Ethan had spent his childhood looking cold and forbidding in the evening light. The house that had once been filled with love and laughter now represented everything dark and twisted about the woman who had raised him after his parents' death. "She's in the East Wing," Nathan reported through Ethan's earpiece. "Second floor, corner room. Margaret arrived hours ago with hired security. They're armed and preparing to move her tonight." Agent Martinez approached their vehicle. "This is now a federal kidnapping case. We can't let civilians enter a hostage situation." "That's my daughter," Ethan replied with deadly calm. "I'm not staying back while her life hangs in the balance. That's my daughter in there, the daughter I chose, the daughter I love, the daughter who's been terrorized for 3 days because of my stepmother's greed. I'm not staying in this car while her life is in danger." "The negotiator is trying to establish contact now," Agent Martinez explained. "Margaret is demanding to speak with you directly. She says she'll only release the child if you agree to her terms." "What terms?" Amelia asked. Though she was already afraid of the answer, "She wants you to renounce all claims to Ethan's fortune, agree to a permanent restraining order keeping you and the children away from him, and sign documents stating that Noah is not Ethan's biological son," Agent Martinez said grimly. "In exchange, she'll release Sophie unharmed." "Absolutely not," Ethan said without hesitation. "We don't negotiate with terrorists, and we don't sign away our children's rights to appease a murderer." "Then we go in," Agent Martinez decided, "but I need both of you to stay back until we've secured the scene." As the FBI team prepared for their assault, Ethan felt his phone buzz with a text message. When he looked at the screen, his blood ran cold. The message was from Margaret. "If you want to see the little bastard alive, come to the front door alone. Any signs of police, and she dies." Ethan showed the message to Agent Martinez, who immediately began coordinating a new plan. "She's trying to isolate you, make you vulnerable. This is a trap." "Of course it's a trap," Ethan agreed grimly, "but it's also our best chance to get close enough to save Sophie. She won't hurt me. I'm still her stepson, and killing me would eliminate her access to the family fortune entirely." "Ethan, no," Amelia pleaded, grabbing his arm. "I can't lose you too, not when we just found each other again." "You're not going to lose me," Ethan promised, cupping her face in his hands. "I'm going to bring our daughter home, and then we're going to be the family we should have been all along." Against the FBI's advice, but with their reluctant support, Ethan approached the front door of the estate alone. The grand entrance that had once welcomed him home from school now felt like the mouth of a tomb, cold and threatening in the growing darkness. Margaret opened the door herself, dressed impeccably as always, but with a wildness in her eyes that Ethan had never seen before. She held a gun in her perfectly manicured hands, and her smile was as sharp as a blade. "Hello, darling," Margaret said mockingly. "How nice of you to join our little family reunion. I was beginning to think you didn't care about your precious little bastard after all." "Where is she?" Ethan demanded, his voice deadly calm despite the fury burning in his heart. "Safe, for now," Margaret replied with cruel satisfaction. "But that could change very quickly if you don't listen carefully to what I have to say." "I'm listening," Ethan said, though every instinct screamed at him to attack this woman who had destroyed his family and terrorized his child. "You're going to choose, Ethan," Margaret continued, her voice taking on the tone of a teacher, explaining a simple lesson to a slow student. "You can have your fortune and your legacy, or you can have these people who are contaminating our family name. But you can't have both." "They are my family," Ethan said simply. "Sophie is my daughter, Noah is my son, and Amelia is my wife. Money means nothing compared to them." Margaret's face twisted with rage at his declaration. "Then you're an even bigger fool than I thought. But don't worry, darling, after tonight, you won't have to make that choice anymore." That was when they heard Ida, small voice calling from somewhere in the house. "Daddy, Ethan, are you really here?" Ethan's heart exploded with love and fear as he recognized Sophie's voice calling for him with the same trust and affection she'd shown as a child. She still loved him, still believed he would save her, despite everything that had happened between them. The final confrontation was about to begin, and Ethan knew that the next few minutes would determine whether his family lived or died. Chapter 10. Love's Ultimate Victory. The sound of Sophie's voice calling his name shattered every wall Ethan had built around his heart over the past 4 years. Without thinking, without regard for his own safety, he pushed past Margaret and ran toward the sound of his daughter's voice. "Daddy, Ethan," Sophie cried out again, and Ethan followed the sound up the grand staircase he had climbed as a child, taking the steps 3 at a time. He found her in what had once been his childhood bedroom, bound to a chair but alive. Her face lit up with pure joy when she saw him. At 13, she had grown tall and beautiful, but she was painfully thin from years of poverty and 3 days of captivity. Her clothes were torn and dirty, but her eyes, those same soulful brown eyes that had captured his heart 4 years ago, still held the same trusting love that had made him want to be her father. "Daddy, Ethan, you came for me," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I knew you would. I never stopped believing you still loved me." Ethan's hands shook as he untied the ropes binding her, his vision blurred by tears he couldn't control. "I'm here, Princess. Daddy's here, and I'm never letting anyone hurt you again." The moment her bonds were free, Sophie threw herself into Ethan's arms with the desperate strength of a child who had thought she might never see her father again. Ethan held her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, feeling her precious weight in his arms, overwhelmed by the magnitude of love that had never diminished despite 4 years of separation. "I'm so sorry, baby girl," Ethan sobbed against her hair. "I'm sorry I left you. Sorry I believed lies about you and Mama. Sorry I wasn't there to protect you. Can you ever forgive me?" "I forgave you, a long time ago." "Daddy," Sophie whispered. Her small arms wrapped around his neck with fierce determination. "I know someone made you believe bad things about us, but I always knew in my heart that you still loved me." "You were right, Princess," Ethan said, pulling back to cup her face in his hands. "I never stopped loving you, not for 1 second. You're my daughter, Sophie. Biology doesn't matter. You're my daughter because I choose you, because I love you, because you chose me as your daddy." Before Sophie could respond, Margaret's voice cut through their reunion like a blade. "How touching," she said from the doorway, the gun in her hands pointed directly at them. "The great Ethan Bennett, brought to his knees by a bastard child who isn't even his blood." Ethan slowly stood, positioning himself between Margaret and Sophie, his body a shield protecting his daughter. "It's over, Margaret. The FBI has the house surrounded. You can't escape this." "I don't intend to escape," Margaret replied with cold calculation. "I intend to finish what I started 4 years ago. If I can't have the Bennett fortune, then no one can, especially not some gold-digging whore and her mongrel children." The racism and hatred in Margaret's words made Ethan's blood boil. But he forced himself to remain calm, for Sophie's sake. "Sophie, baby, I need you to get behind me and stay low." "No, Daddy," Sophie said with surprising strength, moving to stand beside him instead of behind him. "We're a family. We face things together." Ethan's heart swelled with pride at his daughter's courage, even as he feared for her safety. This brave, beautiful girl had survived 4 years of poverty and 3 days of terror, yet she still had the strength to stand by his side. "You killed my father to marry into this family," Ethan said, finally voicing the suspicion that had haunted him for years. "You've spent decades stealing from the Bennett legacy, and now you're willing to murder children to keep your secrets safe." Margaret's mask of civility finally slipped completely. "Your father was weak, just like you. He actually loved you, cared more about your happiness than the family reputation. I couldn't let that continue." "You poisoned him," Ethan said, the pieces finally falling into place. His heart attack wasn't natural. A small dose of digitalis in his morning coffee. Margaret confirmed with chilling pride. Untraceable after death, and so fitting for a man with a weak heart. He never suspected his loving wife was slowly killing him. Before Ethan could respond, the bedroom door burst open, and FBI agents flooded the room. In the chaos, Margaret swung her gun towards Sophie, her finger moving to the trigger. Ethan reacted on pure instinct, throwing himself in front of his daughter just as the gun fired. The bullet tore through his shoulder, spinning him around. But his only thought was Sophie's safety. "Daddy!" Sophie screamed, dropping to her knees beside him as he collapsed. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, but Ethan's only thought was for Sophie's safety. As he collapsed to the floor, bleeding heavily, he heard Sophie screaming his name and felt her small hands pressing against his wound, trying desperately to stop the bleeding. "Daddy, don't leave me again," Sophie sobbed, her tears falling on his face as she knelt beside him. "Please don't leave me. I love you so much." "I'm not going anywhere, Princess," Ethan whispered, his voice weak but determined. "Daddy's not leaving you ever again." Margaret was quickly subdued and arrested, her decades of manipulation and murder finally at an end. But Ethan's focus was entirely on his daughter, on the beautiful child who was holding his hand and begging him to stay strong. "Sir, we need to get you to a hospital," the paramedic said as they loaded Ethan onto a stretcher. "My family," Ethan said urgently, his eyes searching for Amelia and Noah. "Where's my family?" "Right here, my love," Amelia said, appearing at his side with Noah in her arms. She looked terrified but relieved, her face streaked with tears as she saw that both Ethan and Sophie were alive. "Daddy got hurt saving me," Sophie explained to Noah, her voice filled with pride and love. "He took the bullet that was meant for me." Noah reached out with his small hand to touch Ethan's face, his blue eyes so like his father's wide with concern. "Are you going to be okay, Daddy?" "I'm going to be perfect, buddy," Ethan assured him, his heart overflowing with love for this son he was finally getting to know, "because I have my whole family with me." In the ambulance rushing toward the hospital, Ethan held Sophie's hand while Amelia cradled Noah, their family finally together after 4 years of painful separation. The bullet wound was serious but not life-threatening. And Ethan felt stronger with each mile because he was surrounded by the people who meant everything to him. "Amelia," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion as he looked at the woman he had never stopped loving, "will you marry me again? I know I don't deserve another chance, but I want to do this right. I want to be the husband and father you all deserve." "Yes," Amelia whispered through her tears, leaning down to kiss him gently. "Yes, Ethan, I'll marry you again, because our love survived the worst betrayal imaginable. If we can survive that, we can survive anything." "We're really going to be a family again?" Sophie asked, her voice filled with wonder and hope. "We were always a family, Princess," Ethan replied, squeezing her hand. "Love made us a family, not marriage certificates or adoption, paper sand. Love is what's going to keep us together forever." 3 hours later, in his hospital bed with his shoulder bandaged but his heart whole, Ethan signed the adoption papers that would legally make Sophie his daughter once again. This time, though, it wasn't about biology or legal obligation. It was about choice, about love, about a father and daughter who had chosen each other despite every obstacle. When Amelia revealed that their baby would be a little girl, a sister for Sophie and Noah, Ethan wept with joy, overwhelmed by the beautiful future stretching before them. "What should we name her?" Amelia asked, her hand resting on her growing belly. "Hope," Sophie said immediately, "because she represents our hope for the future, our hope that love really can conquer everything." As Ethan looked around at his family, his wife, his son, his chosen daughter, and the baby who would soon join them, he knew that Sophie was right. Love had conquered the lies that had separated them, the pride that had blinded him, and the evil that had tried to destroy them. Their love story had been tested by betrayal, strengthened by separation, and proven unbreakable by the ultimate sacrifice. They were a family not because of blood or law, but because of choice, commitment, and a love so powerful that not even 4 years of lies could destroy it. In the end, love had won, and their happy ending was just the beginning.